Cheryl Sanders, and I'm Professor of Christian Ethics here at the Howard University School of Divinity. And I want to welcome everyone to our Womanist Consultation. Our theme is continuing the Womanist Tapestry, and we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the first ever Womanist Consultation that was held at Howard University School of Divinity in October of 1988. And we're very excited about having a conversation today, this morning. We have a distinguished panel of presenters who were present and accounted for and representing and holding forth back in 1988. And here we are 30 years later, by the grace of God, continuing to do our womanist scholarship and work, and continuing to answer the vocation to ministry, the vocation to academic research and writing, the vocation to social justice and social change, all of which is embedded in the womanist idea. I want to let you know that we will invite, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and you do have in your conference program a bio of each of our presenters, and I'm not going to read those bios mainly because I don't have my glasses. No, I seriously, I invite you to read the details of our presenters' bios, but the most important thing that I have to say about our panelists, and I will give them, I'm going to introduce them as a group, and then I'm going to give each one of them an opportunity to give us an oversight. I'm going to ask each to keep their statement to 10 minutes so that we will hear from our panelists and we'll do some engagement among us, because the truth be told, the four of us could continue this conversation the whole day, because we have so much to remember. And when one person speaks or tells a story or drops a name, the rest of us resonate with that, and there are more stories and more names. But this is an important opportunity for us, especially to establish the important role that Howard University School of Divinity, as a historically Black theological institution, played in helping lay a foundation for this work that 30 years later many of us take for granted. And so, without any further, well, let me just say one other thing before I introduce our panelists. We have endeavored, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to continue this, to establish a social media footprint, imprint for this event. So we do have a hashtag Womanist Tapestry that you can use, and while you are listening, and if you want to use Womanist Tapestry, there we go. Womanist Tapestry. So please hashtag Womanist Tapestry. It's Dean Pierce got the shirt. You know, she's a social media queen. And so if you're on Twitter, we encourage you to use that hashtag, and you can post your comments even while we're speaking, and that'll help us to generate more engagement in this conversation. But we will be pursuing other opportunities to spread the message and to let people know what we're doing and why it's important, why it's significant to us, and why we are so grateful on this 30th anniversary. And so, our first presenter is Dr. Dolores Carpenter. For a number of years, decades really, she was a professor of religious education here at Howard School of Divinity. She is now retired. She also was for many years pastor of the Mission Park Christian Church. She is also an alumna of the School of Divinity, and so she brings a wealth of perspective. She was one of the first of 4 lecturers when the initial sort of, it was actually kind of pre-womanism, kind of simultaneously to the first appearance of the term womanist in print that we are aware of was Dr. Katie Cannon, who passed away a few months ago, wrote a chapter in an anthology that was published by Letty Russell. And the title of her chapter was Womanist Interpretation of the Bible. I believe that's correct. And that was the first appearance in print of the term womanist by a scholar in religion. That was published in 1985. Well, in 1985, we also had an initial lecture series here at Howard. And the 4 lecturers were all named either Dolores or Cheryl. So I was on the faculty here. I'm Cheryl Sanders. We had Cheryl Townsend-Gills, who is our second presenter, who is a sociologist, who's done fantastic research over the years, particularly on church women. And then we had Dolores Carpenter, who talked about the professionalization of the ministry by women. And then we had Dolores Williams, who was at that time finishing her work in systematic theology at Union Seminary, and she did a piece called The Color of Feminism, which is a very important piece. She gave that lecture here at Howard before it appeared in print. And I just want to say a brief word about Dolores Williams. She has some rather serious health challenges, is not able to travel. She's under the care of her daughters in Nashville, Tennessee, and so we want to keep her in our prayers. But she really did so much of the pioneering work, and she was one of the original 4 presenters, the Cheryl and Dolores show, that got this ball rolling in before 88, 1985, and then we published all 4 of those lectures in the fall 1986 issue of the Journal of Religious Thought. So Cheryl Townsend-Gills will be our second presenter. She is now on the faculty of Colby College in Maine. She is still doing sociology. She is doing African American studies. She is still the expert, particularly on women in the sanctified churches. And she herself is an ordained Baptist minister. And then, last but not least, by any stretch on our panel, is one of our 1988 pioneers, is Dr. Renita Weems. And she, for many years, taught at Vanderbilt Divinity School. She is now serving with her husband at Ray of Hope Community Church in Nashville. And she also is a frequent speaker and guest here on our campus in the ministry of Rankin Chapel, and she's been our commencement speaker for the Divinity School, so she's no stranger to our school. But Dr. Renita Weems will be our third panelist. So I'm going to invite our panelists to just give their opening statement in that order, and then we will engage in conversation, and we will allow time for questions from the audience. But what I would prefer, our audience questions, if you would write them down, and that'll maybe enable us to facilitate getting everyone's question answered. So we'll begin with Dr. Dolores Carpenter.
Thank you, Dr. Sanders. Can you hear me, first of all? Now it's on. Okay. Wow. Great to see everybody, first of all. This is a real reunion for all of us at the table. And with so many of you there, I came here just looking forward to seeing everyone. And it has not been disappointing. You know, I always tell people 85% is just getting there. So, I want to say about womanists, people didn't like that word in the beginning. In fact, the dean of this school, we had that conversation about black women not wanting to call it feminist theology. They weren't so sure about womanist. But it did stick, praise God. And we were at Howard using Katie Cannon's work in a field education class. We had a Ford Foundation grant for women in nonprofit organizations. And we did the seminar using Katie's book, in fact. And so we were well on our way to embracing womanist. We also had a Women in Ministry conference early on. I came here in 82, so it was probably 83. We had our first Women in Ministry conference. Dr. Lois Pope was the student coordinator with me preachers, researchers. I can remember Mullen Dobson lecturing. I can remember Prathia, Paul Wynn preaching. We were at the other campus on Randolph, and then we went on to the main campus and had events even at Rankin Chapel. What I learned in putting that class together was trying to contact the women graduates of Howard Divinity School. Me having finished in '69, my God, 50 years ago, I had to pause because I can't believe that. But I learned that the women graduates of the school were impoverished and they were ill. All kind of sickness. In fact, I was the only woman in divinity here when I attended. There was a second woman who came in after me, and she had died. And there was just a burden in my heart. I've always had a passion for women in ministry. My grandmother, who was ordained after me, but I worked right by her side as an evangelist, missionary caution, mother caution, eventually a Women's Minister Alliance in Baltimore City made her reverend. It was long after I had finished divinity school that she became a reverend, though she taught me. I would go on New Year's Eve and watch women preach. Maybe they give them 10 minutes and they'd have to pull their coattail. I sat there as a teenager and said to myself, this is terrible, these women are so gifted and they need another platform. I said one day this is going to change when they'll be able to speak more than just once a year for 10 minutes. So that passion started in me as a child and it never left me. I've always been more interested in the casualties, not so interested in the narratives of triumph and victory, but all the women who are suffering and struggling that's still going on today. So I found that out early on when I came to Howard. We needed to change the culture of this city, this metropolitan area. And so I set about advocacy in my own way. I'll give you just an example, one thing that happened. We went to Korea, a group of us, 2 women in the group, the DC government kind of friendship thing. And all of us were pastors and ministers. We were all supposed to preach there. And the 2 women, of course, rode together. But when we got there, the other woman, I won't call her name, but she told first the church that she was supposed to preach in, she had to preach in the fellowship hall, would not be the Sunday morning. Then we got another message that, could you please send a man? We really don't want a woman at all. And of course, we told the brothers if they went, we would break their legs. So and while I got to be the first woman preaching a huge Korean holiness church in Seoul, Korea, she didn't get to preach at all, and I had to stay 2 weeks in the room with her, with the reality of that. And so I always had opportunity from when I was very young, but I always was so aware of my friends and relatives who were close to me, who were really struggling, who mortgaged their homes, who were sick, who were just we don't know the psychological effect when people deny who you are at your core. I had a preacher called when I was 14. That's all I've ever been. But for someone to say you can't do it and you can't be it, can you imagine the psychological and physical toll that take, the stress? And so I think in 2001, I was on the cutting edges when I did my book Time for Honor. I was interested in the data gap. I wanted to see a nationwide study, and of course my book Time for Honor is one of only 3 that have ever been done, although there is a new one being written now by Reverend Dr. Aileen Campbell Reed, and she is updated the data. My data went to 99, Women of Uphill Climb, that came out about the same time, so we hadn't really had a study like that done in 20 years, and the early studies, Women of the Law and Uphill Climb, didn't have any subset of African American women, so I was trying to fill the data gap, and now the ATS has a million grant, has given ATS a grant. 67 seminaries will be following up on their their graduates with regard to gender, race, and class, so I'm excited about that. We can celebrate some things, that in 3 denominations, clergy women have tripled, the Episcopal, the Evangelical Lutheran, and the Assemblies of God. In in two denominations, they have double ordained women, the United Universalists and the United Church of Christ. What is interesting in looking at the African American church is it's so hard to get data. We have to give credit to the A&Es, and even that data hasn't been broken down by women pastors. I've always felt that looking at women pastor is a benchmark of advancement for women in ministry. Why do I say that's the benchmark? Because if churches don't pay anybody else, they pay the pastor. The opportunity structure is the greatest in the pastor. And I've spent years teaching women in the ministry here, trying to convince women to consider the pastor. Not many of them that were coming in to the door in the early days were considering the pastor. I certainly didn't consider it either when I came in the door. But I soon came to find out that that was the benchmark, because I want to talk, there are three things we need. We need pay, we need mentors, and we need advocacy. And we must not be in a period of stagnation where we're not advocating anymore. There's still so much work to be done. But in the A&E church, for example, we're learning that there are 1% of the clergy are women pastors, 26%. I'm sorry, let me read this correctly. There are 1189 clergy women in A&E church that are congregational pastors, 26% of all their pastors. So let's give them a hand. I'm so proud of what the A&E church has been able to do, because now women can strengthen women. And I know my 10 minutes are they up, because you know I can talk forever on this subject. But I'm able to go to consultation of A&E women and see where women now can help women, because numbers are important, and the critical mass, they don't have to wait on male colleagues to encourage and strengthen and support them. They now have enough women pastors and enough churches with resources to move this train forward. So to God be the glory. I both rejoice, but I'm still in pain. Where is the National Baptist? Where is the Church of God in Christ? I'm still looking, and I'm still in touch with all those women, graduate of theological education, who are dying and ill and suffering and didn't have health insurance and didn't have a pension so they could retire. Lord have mercy on us. Those of us that have been called and done well, we have a great obligation to help these women. God bless you.
Amen. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, thank you to my colleague, Cheryl Sanders, my colleague, Dean Yolanda Pierce, and to all of you here at Howard University Divinity School who made this moment possible this morning. It's joy, and I count it all joy. Let me say this about womanist memory. My first engagement with the term womanist happened when I was a fellow at the Bunting Institute. I was walking through Harvard Square, and I saw a book in the nice thing about walking through Harvard Square is you could see books in the window. You didn't have to wait till you saw the New York Times review. And there was this book with purple coloring on it, and Alice Walker's face in search of our mother's gardens. And I went and grabbed the book, had too much credit, slapped the credit card down, grabbed the book, went back off, opened it up, and read the definition. And it was like fresh water just over me. I had been thinking about women for a while. I majored in women in graduate school. I had to argue that we were important. I was in college at a time when the national shaming of women who were too about the business of caring for our people were shamed in something called the One Hand Report. There was just so much struggle around making clear, first to the dissertation committee, that women mattered, to something called Black culture, we now say African American culture, and now given the transformations of community, we are, that phrase is in play as well, but just making clear, getting my first tenure track job and having my mentor come to my office and say, now that you have a job here at this university on tenure track, you're going to stop doing what you're doing and deal with the larger issues in sociology, I said to him, I became a sociologist to make sure that Black people got included in what we were doing in sociology. And I mean, this was, that's not the exact word. So when I got, and so for those of us who are sociologists, and I'm trained as a sociologist, although I was with Dr. Carpenter at a consultation on women and men when a fighting struggle came through on my call to ministry, we go back a ways. But when I picked up this book and read this dictionary definition, it was like fresh water. Sociologists like theory. And there are great ideas that sometimes govern. How many of us mostly know Marx from the Communist Manifesto? If we got to turn this in the library and had to read all of Marx, we'd lose our minds. How many of us know Du Bois from a few quotations in the souls of Black folk? And when I do presentations on Du Bois, I take the hardcover annotated bibliography of W.E.B. Du Bois and pass it around because I waited, and if it were a baby, it would be healthy enough to go home from the hospital. So there are mountains of thought, but very often those great thinkers give us a little tiny piece that helps to orient and shape our vision in revolutionary new ways. And for me, Alice Walker did that. That term just set off explosions in how to see my own work that I was doing and to see new work that I was doing. I had, I got invited to come here, and Howard University it made it possible for us to really talk about what we were doing. And one of the things that Alice Walker's definition invites us to do, and I'm recognizing that importance in a new way now, but to just take seriously the minute details of Black women's lives and the way in which those minute details contribute to our survival and our wholeness as a people, as a community.
Yes.
I'm in the process now getting ready to retire, and I'm teaching students who I realize have come through courses where they've gotten all the theory about oppression. And they're so full of theory, they don't see the people who are living their lives and pushing back and creatively doing things in spite of the pressures. And one of the things that Alice Walker invites us to do is to look at ourselves in new ways, to love ourselves in new ways. And that last line, loves herself regardless, hits a lot of what is happening with us as a people and what we need to know. I teach in a small liberal arts college, and one of the things I was able to do, you have these crazy moments, and I'm in a space where sometimes my crazy moments, I'm empowered to enforce my crazy moments. So I proposed a course, Sociology of Alice Walker, where we got to take the definition of womanist and look at her entire body of work as it was at that time. And here is a novelist, an essayist, a poet, a woman who claims pagan in a very good and uplifting, earth-loving way, whose idea is that nice little formula that just opens up our eyes so we can see women, all women, the ordinary things that we do. She also, and one of the things that got me, and it's changed my way, the sociology, historiography, and the way I approach looking at the African-American religious experience. In that definition, she has a list of loves, and love is a key word. Love is a key word. Her connections of her work to Howard Thurman, to Martin Luther King. Love is a key word. But she has this list of loves. And in that list, she says, loves the spirit. with a capital S. And it invites us to look at the way that we, as the people of African descent, have underscored the person of the Spirit and reshaped, and we haven't really done this well yet, but we reshaped Protestant Christianity in this nation. And we still don't know all that we have done. Du Bois called it the gift of the Spirit, and in Womanist she says, loves the Spirit. And so we've got to take seriously the pneumatology of our people and its impact on the world. We are co-workers and kindred in the kingdom of culture, to borrow from Du Bois. And Alice Walker's definition, womanist, invites us to see all ourselves in our fullness, to ask questions, to do research, and most of all, to love. Thank you.
I too am delighted to be here, and I'm grateful for the invitation and the opportunity to engage in and to be a part of this womanist tapestry, and to go back into, as Cheryl said, the womanist memory bank, if you will. I certainly want to thank all of you who have invited us here, invited me in particular, your Dean, my friend Dr. Pierce, and certainly Dr. Sanders, who I've been in conversation with over the last couple of years. It's been particular about this conference, and I would have to say that Dr. Sanders sent us notes 2 years ago saying it's coming, and last year it's coming, and asked to put this date down, and so when it came, no matter what else I had to do, I had to make some shift, because these are these benchmarks. These are important moments when you just sort of go back, because you need to kind of go back to these landmarks, these benchmarks, and certainly to be at a place like Howard, to be here to have this conversation. A number of us on the panel, as well as those of us in the audience, we are in a number of PWI institutions all the time, talking about Black womanist thought, or ethical thought, or theological work, but we're not in Black theological institutions enough doing this kind of work and having these kind of conversations. And so I wanted to make the shifts in my own schedule, no matter what I was doing, to make my way, certainly to support Dr. Sanders, to also to support whatever Dr. Pierce is doing, but also to be at Howard to have this conversation. So I want to kind of read something that I have been working on, again at Dr. Sanders' invitation. We were working on something about a couple of weeks ago in Google Doc together, collaborating at the same time, and we started kind of talking about this, and a particular angle on the genesis or the origins of womanism emerging. I'm happy to have followed certainly Cheryl and Dr. Jones here, because I think she helped to lay the kind of foundation for something in particular that I'm interested in as we talk about, in my case, some of the questions of origin. This panel invites me to revisit the period and try making sense to myself and others what it was like back then when sources and resources for doing Black women's religious scholarship were few. Correction, when sources and resources were doing Black women's religious scholarship in a way that white male professors and dissertation advisors and colleagues in the academy deemed acceptable and legitimate were few. Writing back then about Black women's complicated relationship both to the then white women's liberation movement and to Black liberation causes headed up by Black men, then novelist Toni Morrison wrote something that I think accurately sums up what it was like in 1985, 88, 81, when I went into divinity school. And in her 1972 New York Times article, Toni Morrison, then editor at Random House, editor Toni Morrison wrote in the New York Times, and Black women had nothing to fall back on. Not maleness, not whiteness, not ladyhood, not anything. And out of the profound desolation of her reality, she may very well have invented herself. This is a 1972 article in the New York Times by Toni Morrison about black women's relationship to the women's liberation movement. I think that's exactly the title. And she said, and black women having nothing to fall back on, in that quintessential Toni Morrison way of writing. Black women had nothing to fall back on, not maleness, not whiteness, not ladyhood, not anything. And out of the profound desolation of her reality, she may very well have invented herself. Reading surveyed it on where and how womanist criticism got its start. One gets the impression that Alice Walker tossed out the term, black women snatched it up, and that settled it. The intellectual history of womanism is more complicated than that. More complicated than even this brief piece can do justice to. More than a decade of agitating, debating, writing, theorizing, consciousness raising had gone into the setting and setting the stage for Cannon, Katie Cannon's first use of the term in her presentation, The Emergence of Black Feminist Consciousness, which she wrote, which I think she was making in 1985 at the American Academy of Religion. She did not use the womanist in her title. Instead, she used the term black feminism to build on what would have become familiar to her most likely skeptical audience, to lay the groundwork for the new subject of inquiry, black women, and new models of critical consciousness, womanism, which were on the horizon in the academic study of theology/religion. In the 1970s and 80s, womanist religious scholarship emanates from, among other things, from preceding powerful works of black women writers. I want to say that one more time. The 1970s and 80s womanist religious scholarship emanated from, among other things, preceding powerful works of black women thought leaders, Alice Walker being one of them. In fact, a confluence of broad-ranging social and literary movements, political debates, and cultural happenings made the first generation of black women scholars leap at Walker's proposal of womanism as a term for what we wanted to do in our respective fields of religion. Walker was just one of a number of black women writers, activists, thinkers, artists back in the 70s and 80s, challenging the hegemony of whiteness, maleness, upper class, Eurocentric, heteronormative gaze that dominated the time. That black women advocating to put black women front and center, womanism proposed as an apt moniker for describing the work we sought to do in the strange, hostile world of becoming academics, being in the Academy of Religion. By claiming the word womanist as a way to distinguish the work we wanted to do, we were drawing on the decades of more than a decade of theorizing and writing out loud black women public thinkers had been engaged in on behalf of black women. We were also drawing on their courage and their boldness in stepping out and defining black women's experiences and in reinventing a language of our own to describe those experiences. I want to say again, Toni Morrison wrote, and she may very well have invented herself in 1972. It is true that Alice Walker had written 2 successful novels and 2 books of poetry by the time many of us enrolled in graduate departments around the country to study various disciplines of religion. But it wasn't Walker, the novelist, or Walker, the poet, that made women like me sit up late in our apartments and take notice of what she wrote. It was Walker, the essayist, the public thinker, the black feminist thinker, the cultural theorist that captured many of our attention. I was a huge fan of Walker's essays in Ms. Magazine, which she wrote in the 70s. And like many black educated women of that era, looked forward every month to reading the next installment of what Walker was about to say about what it meant to be black and female in a world that valued neither. Walker was a prolific essayist who wrote and lectured often about the differences in black and white feminism, the women's movement, and the black freedom movement, defining black women's creativity, recovering black women's voices, and claiming black female agency. The were based on speeches and writings she did between 1970 and 1982, in which she used her platform to reclaim and rename Black women's experiences and recover the lost lives and contributions of Black women geniuses. But Walker was not the Black feminist thinker who was not the only Black feminist thinker whose work was devoted to reclaiming, reconstructing, redefining, renaming, restoring Black women's experience. The 1970s and 1980s was a renaissance period in Black women's literary and intellectual production. A generation of women was on the scene. Women like Toni Cade Bambara, Angela Davis, Audre Lorde, Barbara Smith, Mary Helen Washington, Toni Morrison, whose wide-ranging works pioneered what are today recognized as foundational volumes in the development of Black women's intellectual history and production. The absence of Black women philosophers and theorists, the absence of Black women in the academy in any significant number in the 70s and 80s meant that we had to rely on Black writers, poets, novelists who were doing the intellectual productive work at that time for us. I want to say that again. In a period when there were not as many Black women scholars, professors, thought leaders, if you will, at the academic level. And so therefore, we were left to writers who were essayists, who were being the cultural theorists at the time, who were being our thought leaders. So when you talk about women like Alice Walker, it was not just the Alice Walker, the novelist, it was also Alice Walker, the essayist. It was Toni Morrison, a novelist at the time, having already, I think, Blue Eye was already out, and Sula. But Toni Morrison writing in the New York Times an op-ed piece on Black women and their relationship to the feminist movement. Again, we were often left to rely on Black women poets, June Jordan, Audre Lorde, Nikki Giovanni, Black women playwrights, Lorraine Hansberry, and Black women novelists, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Toni Cade Bambara, to provide us the source material to what we were after in explaining this or that, which was womanist, which explains why so many of us, if you look back at some of our dissertations, they were drawing from some of the works of these very women. They are on many of these very women, or they're on the work that these women were doing on Ida Wells Barnett and recovering Zora Neale. We have these women to thank to bring Zora Neale Hurston to the forefront, to bring Anna Petrie, literary novelist herself, and Anna Julia Cooper. And these are the women who are helping us to remember this long history of our own kind of intellectual production. Let me go on. We have to thank other Black feminist theorists of the time who, again, there was a larger cultural climate, intellectual climate that Black women had created that allowed, once we read the word womanist, it left off the page. Because we were also reading June Jordan. We were also reading Toni Morrison. We were also reading Toni Cade Bambara. We were also reading, there was a climate that when we read the word womanist, it left off the page because we have to thank other Black feminist theorists, Barbara Smith, Angela Davis, and Audre Lorde, many of them radical and queer, anthologizing, theorizing, poeticizing, and canonizing radical Black women's literature in the 70s that would prove formational and foundational to our work in the 80s. Let me give a shout out to two important texts personally that were helpful to me when I was in graduate school. Texts, in fact, by white feminist scholars that provided rich source material for someone like me in my area. And that would certainly Gerda Lerner's Black Women in White America. Yes. And Ruth Bogan and Bert Lorberg's Black Women in 19th Century American Life. The point here is that first generation womanist scholarship was both the product of and inspired by what can only be described as a Renaissance period in Black women's literary and intellectual production. A period marked by a rich tapestry of writings by and about Black women, by Black feminist thinkers in the arts and beyond. In order to do art, In order to do art, they had to first do us. In order to do their art, they had to first write black women into view. And in order to do our scholarship, we had to first put us in view. Because the scholarship we were completely invisible. And in order to first put us into those sources, we had to find sources. And so when we were in school, they would always ask us, well, that black thing is all right, but what are your sources? And it was an era of searching for sources. And so therefore, our dissertation, not in particular always in my area, but in a lot of areas were sources of mining black women's literature, black women's history, the written and the unwritten, and finding those sources. Began in writing Black Women Into View and Into Subjectivity. They provided those of first-generation womanists with source material required in our disciplines and dissertation and monographs for explaining and serving as test cases on what black women thought. When we wanted to write a dissertation on what black women thought about the book of Exodus, well, based on what? Based on what? And how do you know this? And so we were always having to find sources, and so we had to go, who were the best ones who were capturing what we thought about God in the Bible? The novelists. Yes. It would be the novelists. Their eyes were watching God. It would be Color Purple. That's how because we had no sermons. No printed or written sermons. So what black women thought about God, the Bible, love, relationships, we had to depend upon novelists and fiction writers and poets. Our work reflects, in writing Black Women Into View and Into Subjectivity, they provide those of us our sources on what black women thought, said, or believed about God, the universe, reality, suffering, whiteness. The first generation are products of a particular period in black women's literary production. That is my point. The first generation of us, we are the product of a particular period in black women's literary and intellectual production. The consequence, we are the consequence of a unique period in women's history. And we are the consequence of a specific era of American black protest movements. We are the product of a definite moment in the history of global justice movements. And we are the product of a different era in sexual identity politics and a different time in technology. Oh yeah. We were still using typewriters. I need to make you all know that we were using whiteout back then. Carbon paper. We would print out on the dot matrix. This was a different era. We had to cut paper to move paragraphs around. Again, cut and paste was literal. It was not metaphorical. This was a different era in technology. They're laughing at us. They're laughing. Our work reflects the best and the blind-sightedness of the period. I want to say that again. Our work reflects the best and the blind-sightedness of that period. As both Alice Walker and the late Katie Cannon both urged, we did the work our souls and hands had to do with the tools we inherited. We borrowed, we invented, we retrofitted to clear a piece of territory in the academy for ourselves, to put down some stakes and claim land for our own, and then till the planet and pluck weeds until the next generation can come along to help the work move forward, survive, and flourish. Thank you.
Thank you all for your opening statements. We've covered a lot of ground and a lot of perspective in these three statements. And what I want to do before we turn to our audience questions, I had asked the three of you to think about what is your best hope for the future impact of Womanist Scholarship. We've looked back, but I think that it's important for us to embrace the Sankofa moment as we look back, to also look forward. And you might want to, in your answer, include any insights you might want to share about womanist pedagogy. I have offered for the first time in a number of years a seminar in womanist ethics and theology here at Howard. I taught it last fall, and I've taught that before at other schools as well. But in terms of how our current and future generations of womanist scholars are being formed in terms of their intellectual work, and how the womanist theory and teaching gets incorporated into theological education generally. Now, I know, Dr. Jones, you're not in a theological education environment, but you might address that same question in terms of African American studies in general. Where are we and where are we headed in terms of the future impact of womanist scholarship and womanist work? Anyone might want to engage that.
I actually do guest teaching at seminaries, so I also teach small liberal arts college, but one of the problems that I see, and it is a constant struggle, we do not appreciate, and I thank Toni Morrison for this word, Africanist. We do not appreciate the depth of the anti-Africanist foundation of American racism. And the unfortunate reality is that we have to keep reinventing ourselves to maintain the visibility of Black women and Black people in the work that we do. Over the last almost 55 years, something happened. We as Black people are going through a new reconfiguration of community. The Hart-Celler Act changed the immigration laws, and so I have a lot of Black students whose parents are immigrants, and they know absolutely nothing about the Black experience. I am answering questions from beautiful brown children that I am shocked to hear, because they came in, their parents are professionals, they bypassed the Black community, they've never connected with Black organizations. They're shocked that Black people of different shades of color could actually work together. Remember Alice, somewhat universalist, our cousins are, that they've read so much about the number 2 brown bag, they didn't realize that that's just a little myth in a tiny myth in a much larger big picture of the Black experience. And so all they have are these little tiny bits of myth. So I'm not only reinventing the Black women's experience agency for predominantly white audiences at a small liberal arts college in Maine, but for the Black people in those audiences at a small liberal arts college in Maine. The best and the brightest do not know who we are. So there is this absolute need to make sure that the Black experience, because now you have students in class talking about POC. I'm like, what's POC? What's POC? And so they want to abbreviate us, mash us, and then the folks who are not Black wonder why they have to be associated with folks who are Black, and they really don't understand still continues to shape the demands on our thinking. So the future requires agency. You must make sure to enforce the visibility of Black people, of Black women. And as I said earlier, one of the things that I appreciate is that using the womanist definition with my students, they have to see Black people. I actually had to decide that everybody in the course of teaching on civil rights, Black power, social change would have to read an autobiography or biography of a woman participant, of a Black woman who participated in the civil rights movement, because they literally see the critique, and the critique invisibilizes us. So that sounds a little bit pessimistic. We need to be realistic, because the struggle is still with us, and we must be conscious about it.
I've been working for quite a while on something called a heritage moment. It is church-based, but it can be used anywhere, and we need to this reinforces with our seminarians teaching our history. Dr. Jones, brought this to my mind, and I have written these vignettes, I call them, in the hymnal, African American Heritage Hymnal. I laid out the Black church year so that every Sunday, starting with Emancipation Sunday, Martin Luther King Sunday, go all the way through the year. Of course, your traditional things are there, and Easter, Lent and all that. That's anniversary, Black colleges, Black women, Black men. 52 different opportunities. I go to worship, but I tell you, I did not have my heritage moment. And I think what has killed us trying to incorporate Black history, and we need to rehearse our story over and over and over again. That's how we help to reinvent ourselves, indeed, is that we go too long. So my thing is 2 minutes. When I first got Howard, somebody asked me to do 10 sermons, that's 90 seconds each. And they aired for 2 years in the Baltimore, Washington area. It was amazing, but I couldn't get it. I couldn't get the Ruby Bridges story into 90 seconds, but I did it 2 minutes. So I think every time we gather, whether it's a family gathering or in every class we teach, we ought to have a heritage moment. There ought to be these vignettes, stories, I call them great African American stories, that can be easily told so simple a child can memorize them and be able to incorporate them. And I just want to see us create a culture in which we do this rehearsal, in which we know it is very important. And I think it would go a long ways to keeping the movement moving. I did a hymn because I think music keeps the movement moving, but I also think history keeps the movement moving. And we definitely need to keep the African American story front and center. So when you put it on the screen, before service, after service, somewhere in the service, whether in the sermon, normal children, somebody takes 2 minutes and tells a little slice of the things that have been meaningful to us, that have empowered us and helped us to remember. Even as we go to the Lord's table every Sunday, we need to go to the Heritage table every Sunday. Every class we have, we need to go to that table. And I've been down lecturing at the Film Copeland, and the professor said, we decided, Dr. Carpenter, every class we have a heritage moment. So I think it's a great pedagogical tool. I hope that more people will think about that, because the research now is immense. We have so many sources now that we can draw from.
Thank you. Dr. Williams?
I think the genius and the beauty of this conference is that you have the second part in the afternoon where you demonstrate, prove, and show that womanism is outliving this group right here. That it has been flourishing, not just surviving, but indeed it has been flourishing over the last 30 and 40 years. That there are, I will leave it to the others. I'm not quite sure, it depends upon the context. I don't know if we are first generation, second wave, first wave, third wave, first generation. I don't know. We are second generation, I don't know what we are, but I know that there are those behind us who are, second and third generation women or whatever. And that we are not all that there is, and that the research, that the scholarship, that the production has gone on and has been rich and varied and nuanced and complicated as it should be, and that the writings are still going on. I guess if I had an observation, I'm no longer teaching, but I do think it's we find ourselves in a particular situation. I was sitting here as the others were talking, just trying to think of other disciplines, that on one level we have the academy, we have scholarship, and we are training practitioners. We are in a profession where we are training both future scholars, but we are also training practitioners, people who are going out to do ministry. And I think that tug is seen in some of our work, and it gets worked out in some of the things that we see even in our public events. And so on one level you've got the conversation of what's the future of womanist theological scholarship, and you've got another conversation sometimes, and they're not always parallel, although they do intersect, is what is the future of black women in the ministry and womanist preaching and womanist ways of doing theology in the churches or wherever their context might be. And those are not always the same kind of questions. They certainly intersect with one another. And certainly womanism emerged and is a big part of its definition. And when we see ourselves as doing work that informs our activism, that informs and shapes justice movements. And so we have not always been interested in theorizing for the sake of theorizing. However, we do exist in an academy that rewards us for theorizing for the sake of theorizing, and ask us how dare we be practical, and how dare we be accessible, and how dare we care about the movements of our people, about the real lives of black women and the real lives of black people. And so that tension is part of our ongoing conversation. So we find our students sometimes unhappy with us, struggling with us, not knowing the demands of the academy and the work that we do, and then we find ourselves as professors and scholars unhappy with students who are pressing us with questions and concerns I just won't go any further than that. And so I think that's part of the ongoing tension, but I also think it's also the place of some of our best work in trying to bring those two worlds together. And I think that I wonder, and I'll end on this, I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder, and I do sometimes am concerned about the future of womanist thought, and particularly as it relates to those of us within the Academy of Religion and Biblical Studies, whether we'll still be able to have a conversation with each other between our disciplines and between the Academy and the church. I think that I feel like sometimes there's so much tension and there's so much struggle that I think that is one of my biggest concerns. But I would hope that the younger scholars never lose their footing within the world of, and I don't mean just the church. I'm not just talking about the church, but I'm talking about in the real lived world life of black women, period, wherever we may find ourselves, and black people and our justice movements, wherever we may find ourselves. I hope that the conversation and the cross-fertilization between those two realities are always informing one another. We need womanism within the academy, but we also need the lens of black women and the work and the advocacy of black women within our communities. Thank you.
Just on a historical note, and since we have people who were there from the beginning, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the American Academy of Religion is the guild of persons who were teaching in these fields, theological disciplines, and in the field of religion. The womanist approaches Yeah, it started as one. Okay.
It started as a consultation.
Mike.
It started as a consultation, we had to turn in the paperwork. And then, so there was one session that first year. And then,
But that was before 1990?
oh,
Okay.
because,
I remember something like that. It was 89.
1989. That's what
I
I
think
saw.
at the same time with the Journal of Feminist Studies Religion Roundtable that you all did, that was a spinoff of the 88.
So that would be 89. Okay. All right. Just trying to set the record straight. Thank you, Dr. Floyd. And then the first womanist scholar who was president of the American Academy of Religion was Dr. Emily Towns. Is that correct? Is she the only? Well, Dr. Marla Frederick is the incoming president of the American Academy of Religion, and so that gives them the opportunity. The president of the American Academy of Religion presides over the meeting and also gives a plenary address, significant address, and there are literally thousands of people who attend, especially when it's in the joint format, the Society of Biblical Literature and the American Academy of Religion. As far as I know, we have not had a womanist scholar as president of the Society of Biblical Literature. That's correct? Exactly a week ago, I was at the annual meeting of the American Theological Society, and as of last Saturday, I am president of the American Theological Society. But my question is, when I give my presidential address at the next annual meeting, is there any advice that you have for me? As I'm going to be addressing this august organization, American Theological Society has a lot of people who have long history and long memory, but as president, I want to look forward. Do you have any advice for me addressing the scholars of the old school?
We'll talk about it later on.
Okay.
that's a conversation with pharmaceutical. Medicinal help, yes. But I think some of the very same things that we've already been talking about here are certainly, I mean, I think that they touch upon what you have to do there and reminding where we've come from and what your own expectations and hopes are and visions are for the future in your guild. This is, again, it is a congratulations, outstanding honor for you.
All right. Now, are we, any other, I don't want to cut off panelists before we go to the audience. Do any of you want to give a response to anything someone else has said or something you meant to say and didn't say before we move to our Q&A? We ready? All right. I have preferred for you to write your question, but if you can speak it clearly, we can, so that we can hear, maybe we can repeat it. Yes, and please give your name. So that
My name is Maybelle Taylor Bennett. I work here in Calgary. I'm wondering where our Black womanist scholars are who have engaged in the science who have focused on science and its impact in our theological thinking. I want to congratulate the School of Divinity because we received a AAAS grant which was entitled Science in the Seminaries. And for me, that's a passion. I know for me that science informs my spirituality in a very rich way. And I would imagine that if we're thinking about going forward, we're thinking about the God of the cosmos as well as God of the earth and how it reflects in our own, is reflected in our own lives. And I'm sure, I am certain, there are Black womenist thinkers who are there. And I wondered if you are familiar with them and if you can point us in that direction.
Well, let me just respond by saying that we have, at the Divinity School, participated in the AAAS grant for science and seminaries. Dr. Fred Ware, who is our academic dean, has been our lead person on that. But I believe Dr. Byron also participated. Is she here?
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Dave Byron, who's on our faculty, joined with Dr. Ware, and there were several symposia that we had in conjunction with people in the sciences on the main campus of Howard University, and Dr. Georgia Dunstan, who recently retired as microbiologist, has been very, very important in that conversation because as a scientist, she engages theological and philosophical concepts in her work, her study of the genome. And so we have been privileged here in the Divinity School to engage that work. And Dr. Ware has also presented a paper, and maybe we could give you access to the paper. At the last meeting of the American Academy of Religion, there was a panel, because there are other seminaries who received that grant were reporting on the results of their project. And so he has done a write-up of it, and so we would want to make sure that you get access to that. And then the last thing I would say, her name escapes me, the woman who came here and lectured from Memphis. Barbara Holmes, yes, Dr. Barbara Holmes. And her interest is in cosmology and theology, and so we've had that presentation even in this very space. So we're very interested in pursuing that conversation further. Thanks for the question. But I'm sorry, this gentleman was next, yes.
Can we come to the mic?
Hi, good morning. My name is Kevin McNear. I'm the editor of the Washington Informer. And I really want this, it's for the whole panel, particularly Dr. Means. I did my master's at Emory, and I did my doctoral work at Princeton, and I walked out of my orals with Dr. Ferris. You were the inspiration not to walk out, but we all aspire to be Means, and we just couldn't hit that mark. But all of that said, the reasoning behind it is my question. I'm a child from Detroit. I grew up, the block next to me was bombed in the riots. I covered Trayvon Martin and all these things. I've always wanted to know, as an ethicist, I learned ethics under Jackie Grant. I was in Big Bethel, where I was ordained. And so even though there was this theory, she always told us it had to work. And so I was always looking at ethics and wondering, how do I fit this? You guys were talking about the theories, and it just really hit my mind. Now, in a new generation, how do you talk about your work to women first, and then to the rest of the world in general, when you are striking against the wall of it being too praxis-oriented? Because when they say, I heard praxis-oriented, I said, I got a piece that I got to work with. But then I started going back to Detroit to make it work. And how do you negotiate between the theory and the action when you didn't have resources? And I really was taken aback by your conversation on it. How do you take your work today and empower folk who are dealing with Black Lives Matter or these shootings or the Trayvon Martin and all those things? Whose parents I know and write about. And I can't offer them a theory, I gotta offer them something. And I'm hearing you offering things. And I need to be able to write that in my journalism to go back. Am I clear?
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, I can give a very quick response to
Thank you.
And then others might,
Yeah.
I know you want to hear from
No,
her.
I just want to tell her.
Let me
Thank
give
you, all of you then, but yeah.
Thank you for your question. Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas, who regretfully was not able to join us for the conference, but she was one of the original presenters. She was teaching, was on our faculty teaching theology back in she has written a book, Stand Your Ground, which is a womanist theological reflection on the entire Trayvon Martin situation. And so you might find that to be an engaging conversation from a theological perspective on the whole issue, the crisis that we're facing in terms of community policing and also the larger social justice questions. So, but you had directed your question to...
Well, no, to the panel.
There may be others.
I just always wanted to like grab it in like our system here because she was the model of Princeton, the Paris, and I just knew you were amazing. I've never seen your message.
It's always amazing when you say that.
Well,
I don't remember being a model there. But we love our prophets dead, so you just get through the program and then you barely eke out and you leave with lashes and whips, and then 20 years later they say, "Oh, we just always loved you." I'm a biblical scholar, so I know how myths begin. I understand those kind of things. I think that what's key to understand, particularly within Black women's scholarship, we're talking about in terms of womanism, and what Black women's scholarship, and I would say the liberation scholarship, Black liberation scholarship, that insisted through Cone and others, is that our scholarship emerges out of our commitments and our struggles as Black people. So we are not sitting somewhere in an ivory tower just kind of thinking of thoughts and just and tossing those thoughts around necessarily just theoretically. We are talking about the lived experience and the lived struggles of our people and bringing those struggles and those realities to bear on our scholarship and asking the European scholarship that we are being forced to study what their relevance is to our reality as Black people. So I don't think that I don't want to make it sound like there's such a chasm between Black women's scholarship and Black women's lived lives in the church. I'm not saying there's an enormous chasm, but there are some tensions, and some of them have to do with the necessity and the reality of being in the academy. So I do not think that our work is absolutely divorced from Black people's reality necessarily. There may be some examples here and there where you might take me to task on that. But by and large, I think that we bring our questions and our reality to our particular fields. I mean, that would be mine. And I think that you're absolutely right, in, Dr. Cheryl, in pointing out Kelly's work, which is, front and center, one of the most explicit ones, if you will. An explicit attempt to address a very contemporary matter that is going on. But I think that all of our work, I hope, we would like to believe anyway, it would take those of us here as artists and say whether our work has been relevant to your own particular work, to those of you who are there in the trenches, who say that you are the ones who are in the trenches. You would have to tell us whether our work has been relevant and useful to you.
All right. Who is it? I tell you what, let's do this. Let's make a line, because I don't want to overlook anyone, because I know the Weststone had a question. Can we just make a line? Yeah, that would be helpful. And as you're lining up, please, it's a question and not a presentation.
Which means about 30 seconds to get to the question. I was just going to help us out. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nyla Curry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nyla Curry. And I noticed that there was not a lot of, and by the way, I'm a dual master's degree student in my final year at Wesley. I noticed that there's not been a lot of discourse on a womanist ethic or just a womanist discourse on holistic health. And so my question for you is, in the midst of the cuts and the bruises and tending to our mother's gardens, and in the midst of the cuts and bruises in the academy and in SUD, and even in our church homes and our church communities, as womanists, how do you perceive and engage the practices of holistic health, especially where it concerns taking a hit for our community.
I am not a walking example of holistic health. However, in an echo of what Dr. Weems talked about in terms of the broad range of people who were at work inventing, creating sources, one of the things that Black feminists did, and I'm thinking of Evelyn White's book on, and I used it in one of my courses, and I'm blanking on the exact title, which is one, the Black Women's Health book. Every single chapter in that book gave some advice that, and I used it in class when I had a lot of white students who were reading it, and they were helped by it. These are young college women. One woman talking about her self-care for diabetes, but that self-care or strategies for persons who don't have diabetes to care well for themselves. I was able to use one of the chapters to stop my aunt from blaming herself for a condition she developed, an autoimmune condition that she developed. The ability of these Black women, scholars and activists to talk about specific aspects of health, addressing Black people generally, and Black women particularly, was a great source of help. So the womanist idea makes you love yourself regardless. And when we utilized one of the essays that Alice Walker wrote, which is so timely now, if only people would listen to Black women, we would not be in the mess that we are in this society. Alice Walker painted this picture that the world should have come to a halt the first time a Black woman in a supermarket said, "These greens taste like dishwater." What is happening to our environment, what is happening to our earth, so many ways of thinking about health of the whole person. So it's what are we doing and how are we using it? But Evelyn White's book is classic because it helps us talk to one another on a practical level. At the same time, it helps us love ourselves regardless.
I just also want to say that one of the students here at the Divinity School, Andrea Hogan, who had been administrator in the School of Medicine, nursing, she was in the nursing department, she did her DMin on following up my own study and asking women about health issues. And that is a great resource to read. And then Toni Hawkins, she published a book last year on self-care. And I've had a lot of conversations. I've been to some of her seminars, but about retirement as self-care. Because I realize that retirement, that's mainly what it is, self-care. For the first time in my life, I work out of a house for myself, and I'm taking care of myself in a way I never did when I had these other responsibilities on me. And so I think that that would also be an excellent resource. Toni Hawkins on self-care is something we all need to talk about because it does incorporate holistic health.
Thank you. Reverend Denise Anderson, 2008 graduate of HUSD. I'm so fed by this, and my sister's question here brought to mind the issue of eco-womanism and how womanist thought informs our treatment of the earth, because both Black women and the earth herself both know what it's like to be subjugated and to be dominated. And so I was really interested in Dr. Thompson-Gilch, you just sort of touched on it right now. I'm interested in your reflections on womanism as it relates to both eco-justice, the care of the earth, by climate change.
I can't speak for, womanist concerns, but the idea, and I spend more time looking at how does the idea preface the ways in which we look at, et cetera. And again, we're asking questions about the earth as our mother, the earth-based religions that women devise in a wide range of cultures that get overlooked, get ignored, get demonized in hegemonic, in hegemonic, especially Christianities that deny climate change and all of the things that are happening to us as a people. I think it empowers us to speak up and participate. I'm not sure I'm hearing the question right, but I think it's central. Ecofeminism, eco-womanism, the whole issue of justice for the earth and the ability, how many, one time, one of our great preachers, Reverend Dr. was preaching a sermon out of Revelation at Ebenezer Anglican Church, and she raised the question of whether or not we are creating our own apocalypse in terms of that text that talks about a third of the earth and what's happening. And not too long after that, or it was right around the time that oil platform in the Gulf created that spill. Thank you. When President Obama was, and the really nasty way in which his enemies responded, but it made me raise questions in the sermon because of her sermon about how we ignore what's going on in Nigeria and the role of the oil companies. And the question said there was a group of 500 women, I forget the name of the people they were from. They were a people who had been displaced because of the oil company, and the men had no jobs. So 500 women took over the oil platform and were not going to allow this oil company to function until their husbands had jobs. And I raised that question. Nobody's talking about what the environmental impact is on Nigeria of all of these oil companies, etc. And a week later, one of my church members who was from Nigeria said he went back and he went online and discovered how much death and disruption had been brought about that he had never even thought about. Just because Claudette Copeland mentioned, are we making our own apocalypse? It reshapes the way you think, and you say something in a certain, and a man comes back and says something about what's happening to my people. So there's also lots of small pieces that we have to connect together in order to heal one another. But that's just an example. That's an answer to the question.
And quickly, let me say this. Most of the work I did on images of God within the women in my study, if you read Time for Honor, and other chapters of Tennessee, Eric Lincoln's section on the spirituality of Black women, but Creator God always tops the list by far. And so there is this connection with creation that Black women have always been forced to have because they can operate within traditional parameters of traditional institutions. So they go outside the box of their appeal was always God made me, and started with their connection with creation. Second thing is faith formation. We know this from children's faith. We know this from studying people's faith. That so many people's faith was sparked through nature. Their love for nature, the beauty of nature. They felt close to God when they're in nature. And finally, I always say this to everybody. The first question God is going to ask you when you get to heaven is, how did you enjoy my creation? And we have to add to that, not only how did you enjoy it, but how did you care for it? And so these are some of the things that women have been writing about that do,
serve others is if we have enough to pour into others, so we have to have enough for ourselves first. So that really resonated with me. So my question for you is, in addition to pushing for women to become pastors, what other leadership opportunities do you see for a graduate of the Howard University School of Divinity? And can you share a little bit more about your strategies and your vision of advocacy?
Okay, thank you. I did teach a class, Women in Ministry, here for years at the school, and it was a wonderful experience. It was at that time allowed under prophetic ministry, and so we got a professor of prophetic ministry, no longer was doing that class, but I think we did go over the many different fields that are open to women, you know, in chaplaincy, counseling, and publishing, and research, and writing. And women are so creative. There are so many titles. In fact, I was at Princeton when I first met Dr. Bean. She may not remember this long ago. It was a seminar on Black women in ministry at Princeton. And I could not get over the very creative titles that all these women had. That they had kind of like, who knows what that is. But anyway, they were doing ministry under that guise. So I am, but I always do caution women though, you have to look at the proportion of how many jobs there are in chaplaincy, or how many jobs, like to be a professor, you're going to go get that doctorate, go through the academic rigors of that. And so we have to be realistic. One of the great places I want women to remember, when you're assistant pastor, you're a pastor. I remember I being an assistant. I was going for standing in the United Church of Christ, and I remember it was a woman conference minister who said to me, well, all those years you were working in Free Will Baptist, you were a pastor. Because I was an assistant pastor. Now, this is where one of my strategies is. We've got to pay our assistant pastors back. Well, let me say, here, I'm going there. Because I learned that your associate minister gets 60% of what the seller gets. What the pastor gets. An associate should get 60% of what the senior pastor gets. Hello. Now we know that's not happening. And one of my pet peeves is in mega churches. I've gone into so many mega churches where so many of our women graduates serve. I'll be at a table, say 10 of them. Huge church, got 14,000 members. They had in every ministry in their church. We go around, I'm the head of this, the head of this. Then I ask one question, are any of you on payroll? And I am appalled and ashamed to say that often I've heard not one. Now we have some women executive ministers, that's kind of fashionable, and that's good. We keep pushing in that area, that's good. But we need to do advocacy pushing. And see, women are sitting in the pew and they're not conscious, they're not thinking is what I think. They don't think about it. But we can't let churches just be family dynasties. But the only people they pay are the people in the pastor's family. Hello. My son, my daughter, my uncle, my cousin, they're the only people on payroll in the whole church. And all these other women trained in seminary, graduate theology seminary, doing all this work in ministry. That somehow, I know there is an attempt to have associate ministers organized, and they really do need to do that. Within denominations and then across denominations to advocate. That alone would open up so many more opportunities for women. We're already doing the work, but just haven't gotten paid. When I went to New Jersey and got my first job at Essex County College, the lady who was on the advisory committee for a large grant, $400,000 grant back there in the 70s, she said one thing to me. She said, you have done so much, so many different jobs. I had YWC, Planned Parenthood, Baltimore Youth Commission. I have had so many jobs. She said, but you never made any money. She said, and I'm going to change that. God bless her. Woman, who helped me. She said, we got this grant, and I'm going to put your name in as administrative assistant. And it was community-based, Office of Education to developing institutions. Anyway, I went in, my dean, I went in administrative assistant, the only person, staff person on the grant. My dean went away for a month, came back, and he looked at what I had accomplished. He said, you are not an administrative assistant. The board didn't approve the man that they put forth as director. He called me and he said, would you be willing to be the director of this program? But all because a woman advocated, because she saw another woman so gifted and who had worked so hard but never made any money. And that is one of my pet peeves. So come on, you all that are working in these churches, you know, stand your ground when it comes to that. All right, thank you. Now, our time is limited. We have 2 more questions, and I have 1 written question, and then we're going to have to transition into three more. Okay. Who's next?
Sorry, and just an announcement for anyone, for all of us who do have questions, these are, and presenters as well, these are unidirectional mics. So you have to speak directly into them so that everyone can hear you, else we won't get it on the recording.
Doctors, thank you so much. Thank you deeply from my spirit for what you presented and the work that you have done and hopefully continue to do. Given the questions about science, I want to particularly lift up Sister Dr. Alondra Nelson, who wrote The Social Life of DNA, in which she talks about the sociology of how people embrace science. She's also an expert that commands much respect in the interdisciplinary enterprise of Afrofuturism. So when we talk about cosmologies and hard sciences, she's the sister to go to, and somebody we must pay attention to. Dr. Alondra Nelson. My question, I think, reflects the spirit of just the last one that was asked. You all have done a very important lifting of that context and agency on the part of Black Women Matter. As somebody who's a person of faith, but not operating the parameters of the academy or the church proper, I wonder about the continuous struggle that Black womanism represents in a hyper-focused professionalism that really truncates purpose, truncates connectivity, and really doesn't reflect thinking out of the box. In response to the young lady, and I'll step back, it is no accident now that Michelle Alexander is studying theology. Michelle Martin is studying theology. Black women historians have always acknowledged, in part in their good work, the theological driver of what Black women are doing. So I'm very concerned about, and I don't romanticize this, but I see Black women going outside the entrapment of professionalization that's very present in the church. As much as I love it, I think that's a very important struggle.
Well, I'd like to respond to that, but I'm going to say it real quickly. I often say this: women don't do ministry the same way, even though I believe there's professionalization as far as their pay, their placement, their promotion, but once in these positions, they have a great opportunity. Because ministry is one of those general fields where you can move in any direction. All ministers kind of have strengths in certain areas. And so whatever your strength of interest is, help to the community, help for the world globally, for the climate, for the planet, you can do all of that. So I just tell women, don't be boxed in. Once in these positions, then stay true to your calling and your purpose.
I think I appreciate your comment, my brother, on a couple of levels. One, first, mentioning of Afrofuturism and Alondra Lewis, I believe is the last name. Because and this is something I would share with everyone, and it's also in response to one of the earlier questions about eco-feminism and eco-womanism and other kinds of things. And on one level, I would say this is, I'm loving that we are flourishing in all kinds of areas and raising all kinds of questions. Although I take Katie Cannon's comment to me many years ago, teaching me how to field questions. And she just always used to say, Renita, never let people make you swim in waters where you don't know where the sharks are. And, which means that I know which questions I'm supposed to answer and which questions are beyond me. And it's like, no, that's not, baby, I don't know the answer to that question. That's not my area. Or I've thought about it, but I haven't thought about it enough to put a mic to my mouth to talk about it. So, I'm of a certain generation. I haven't read everything. I'm not up on every topic there is. Which my point then there for those of us in this particular audience is you must read broadly. You must read more than us. So when I was coming on, we only read the Bible. understand you more than the Bible and Womanist now. I need you to read Afrofuturists. I need you to read Black women who are doing science fiction. I need you to begin to read those who are in the area, of other areas that are escaping me right now. You do not use piety as a masquerade for death. You're not deep just because you're pious. You're not deep just because you read us. You have got to read. I mean, we are right across the field in every area. So if you want to talk about ecofeminism, my PhD is just in Bible, baby. Go read what the people doing in science are talking about and to help inform me in this work and to help inform you in that work. We have not done all every work in every topic and know everything about everything that's out here now. The work is, the harvest is plentiful. Is the laborers few, but there are laborers that we are now, as Black women, as people of color, throughout these disciplines, doing some of this work. I think that is important. Secondly, to answer this brother, to respond to this brother's comment, because it did make me think of something I say in my brain, I never say out loud, when I go to various conferences and I'm talking to women's conferences. And I'm like, is everybody in ministry now? It's like every woman I meet is, who has a PhD in something else is also a minister. And so I think it is interesting that when I heard that Michelle Alexander was now, doing some work at Union and also taking classes, and some other professional women, journalists and scientists and physicians and musicians and others. And you're saying, my gosh, I remember when no one wanted to be in ministry, and now everyone. But I think that at the heart of it is not just coming into ministry. It is studying faith. It is trying to connect with, stay in connection, and trying to find out where do you go when you don't know where to go. And where do you, I think all of us find ourselves in these professions and have found ourselves alienated and bruised and wondering about how to get back to what's really matters most. And we are going into seminary, and I think some of us are right here as well. We could do better, some of us, with vocational counseling and student loan debt and all of those kind of things. But I think it is a number of women in high achieving positions who are at the top of their field are finding their way into ministry, seminary, and all of those things. Because I think it is a quest to come back to their center and their source of their strength and their mother's God and their grandmother's faith. And I think it is a very, we understand it as professional women, especially the desire, the need to come back to the source of our strength. And I think that for a lot of us, though not all of us, a lot of them are moving in that direction because it is to come back to self and to find places of healing in our mother's faith. I won't go any further than that, but please do. Next question.
Thank you.
Steve Lipson, a graduate student at Vanderbilt. Can any of you share any memories from the 1988 Women's Consultation and how the consultation influenced your thinking or your work?
Well, go ahead. Yes, I can share memories that the consultation came about one day. Dean Lawrence Jones, who is deceased now, but when he came to Howard, he came from Union Theological Seminary. And one day he said to me, "What is this womanist? What is this womanist scholarship?" He said, "Wait, why don't you invite the womanists to come here and have a conversation?" It was just like that. And of course, when he committed to resources, he said, "Do it," and he committed to resources to do it. And so we reached out to these womanist scholars, and everybody was just so gracious, and they came and they gave these wonderful papers, and Dr. Winks was the preacher. We brought her as the preacher, so she brought thunder, and it just happened, and we were very thankful to have the opportunity to do conversation just like this with audience response and engagement, and I'll start with this. One of the most important things that happened was the bonding. Because if truth be told, we don't, as womenist scholars, see eye to eye, especially if they don't see eye to eye with me on a whole lot of things. But see eye to eye on a lot of things. But the bond, the collegiality, there was a different mode. Somebody said we had to reinvent ourselves. We had to reinvent our way of relating to each other as scholars. Because let me just stop at this. The men weren't our best role models of collegiality. I'll stop at that. But I think we need to move on to the next question. I got one more question, and we've got to move on. Yes.
Peace, everybody. My name is Wasaka Sidibe. And my question is for you all. Dr. Weems, you alluded to the reality that doing this work is very difficult. And a lot of times it's glorified, but people don't really comprehend how hard it is to continuously choose yourself and your call over and over again in an institution that doesn't necessarily affirm women, particularly Black women. So my question for you all is, how have you been able to remain authentic to your call and yourself in spite of a lot of the realities that may have discouraged you on your path?
Good question.
I want to thank God for the different people that helped me along the way. I think we all had to have some mentors. So me being at Rutgers with Sam Proctor, Dr. Jim Scott, who was a past professor and is still alive at 78, living in Vermont. He was down blind recently, but I do stay in touch with him. And that believed in us. There wasn't a traditional route the way we had to go, because we didn't have, as was stated, many sources, so we were really fishing. But those who believed in us, and I just give praise to God for, and a lot of times it had to be men in those days because there weren't women in place, but it was, that they opened themselves. This institution, for example, had been trying to get me to come back and work an hour once before. And I just want to say that they remembered women and they knew there had to be a change. When there were no women faculty and they had all these women students, and who we're going to get. And so people were advocating and pushing us along. Unfortunately now, most of our mentors are dead and we're trying to mentor others. It's a very different dynamic, but thank God for those who believed in me. I call the name of Sarah Lincoln and Sam Proctor and Jim Scott, and they did make room for me. And then out of this, I went on and not only, I was already teaching here, but I finished my doctorate, did the book, and on and on and on. So I just want to give some credit to the brothers who also struggle with us.
Just one more question. This Reverend Milligan question, Reverend Ollie Milligan. How can we build a bridge between the academy and the old school religious pastors, male and female? You got that?
One of the ways in which we build bridges is that those of us in the academy really have to be conscientious of going to the spaces where the so-called old school folks are. We gotta go, we gotta be there, we gotta take an opportunity to participate when they invite us, and sometimes we have to explain to them that no, we were not ordained to preach from the floor, and explain that things have got to change. But being there, being present, going, it really involves connecting with the community. As I told the graduate students at Harvard, buy some tickets to the banquet and show up. It sounds, and when we're talking old school, I can remember growing up, getting ready to go to college. My father, who was a Baptist deacon, daughter, I don't care what you believe. Make sure you have a church membership. And you're going to NAACP. I'm like, okay. Like, yeah, he cared what I believed been judged by members of the community as women, this was the criteria, women who had worked hard for a long time for change in the Black community. I was interviewing her, so I was in 75, 76. I was interviewing her. She's 86 years old. She had been keeping her age a secret because she didn't want people to restrict her because she was old. And I was like, wow. She told me her age, and I had to be real careful not to let anybody know when I was sitting in the NAACP meetings doing field work how old she really was. And she said, when I left Arkansas, my father said, I don't care what you believe. Now, imagine the generational divide between the two of us. And here is her father saying, I don't care what you believe, but make sure you join the church and make sure you have a membership in NAACP. Connecting with the community, going and sitting in spaces. When you invite someone, an activist minister, to come and help your activist group, go visit their church. You'd be surprised how just the connections will change a conversation and build consciousness. Because especially for women in ministry, it has been a congregation by congregation, association by association, district by district struggle. But you've got to be in the room where it happens. Most folks can't come to the academy. They don't even understand what it is you do for a living. How is it you get paid to read books? But you got to go to that space, and if you're there, and sometimes you got to take some abuse. I took a dressing down from a bunch of trustees last November, and I'm like, One of them had locked us out of the church, right? The changed the locks on the church. And I remember yelling at this man, I'm in the middle of the street, what you have done is unprofessional, anti-Christian, unchristian. And last Sunday, the same folks that gave me a dressing down, surprised the dickens out of me. The pin I'm wearing is one of the gifts I got. They honored me, surprised me totally. I got a plaque and all that. And the one who locked us out of the church was holding the microphone for me. You've got to be there. You've got, and if you stand, just ask God to give you the strength to stand. One other story about the old school. I was doing some research out in California. I had a little grant to study contemporary black churches. Coming from the Plenty Good Room article, if you go online, just do Jokes plus Plenty Good Room, and you'll see what's going on. So I'm going to this session, I'm reading this fiery activist, black women doing issues of environmental racism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm trying to get churches to sample, because I'm visiting my research. I had a grant to go visit churches. Woo-hoo! Yes! And so I'm getting a list of churches to go to, and I wanted her to tell me what church she went to. So she started out, well, if you want to go to this progressive church, this minister, that minister, I said, no, I want to know what church you go to. And she said, well, it's kind of old school. I said, I don't care. Give me the name of the church and give me the directions. And this is before GPS, so you really had to learn how to remember. I go to, and this is a woman with national reputation, environmental racism. I mean, she has strength. She's doing it. Where did she get her strength? I get there. Deacons in black suits with the little books on their knees, lining out hymns, and the words of Charles Blow, singing their prayers and shouting their song. I'm there. I love the Lord. He heard my cry. That's where she was getting her strength. And if I hadn't said to her, show me where you go to church. So those of us in the academy have got to be in those spaces, and we cannot be condescending, going there with the idea of when are we going to start using the DJ's Bible, and we can sit in the back room and talk about them like they don't know who they are. So I feel very strongly about that, and people wonder why I keep my church membership. I'm up there in Waterville, Maine. I drive 191 miles to church, and I'm glad I've done it. I'm sorry. gotta be there.
If I may make one last comment as well, one of the noticeable differences between 1988 and this year right here, or the noticeable difference between that conference and this conference, is that no one has asked, we have not been challenged on women in ministry. And the notable difference in 1988 was this conference at Howard with the men who were there and elsewhere. We would have been asked, the questions from those who were coming up to the front was what the Bible says. And that was the continuous, that was the groundwork that you were still doing in 1988 and 89. Defending women in ministry, defending the Bible, defending our ability to teach men in seminary. All of that is what is going on. And look at how far we have come.
So I don't even know if there are words to thank our panelists for being here this morning. One of the things that my faculty found out when I became dean almost 2 years ago was that I serve an on-time God. So it is 12:04. We need to let them rest and eat. But I want to thank them. I want to thank Dr. Sanders. I want to thank all 4 of them because I went when we started this conversation about having the conference, and I tried to count their number of academic publications and articles. And after I got to 200, I said, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. Because what I want you to know, for those of you who may not know, is that they represent some of the best and finest of academic scholarship. And that we are going to give them their flowers while they are here. Because I don't want to in 30 years say, oh, we should have. No, I want to honor them. I honor them as myself, a scholar. I honor them because I grew up reading their work. I honor them as a church woman. But I honor them because they keep accepting the call. And that's part of it. You aren't just called one time, because you might call and you might decide to run. You might be called again and again. They keep accepting the call, and that is a call of deep integrity and passion for which we have all benefited. And so I don't have the words to say thank you to them. I will say personally that as we sat in the meeting with Dr. Sanders and we were trying to come up with the hashtag or the theme, and we talked about this word tapestry. This word tapestry came up again and again. Dr. Weems is a quilter. Some of you may or may not know that. And I shared with Dr. Sanders in this meeting that I had said to my 8-year-old, when my daughter was 8 years old, I said, there are Black women who quilt and have been quilting since enslavement, and why quilting was so important to us. And my daughter, who's now 18 and is here and working, started quilting at 8 years old. And I thought about the generations of Black women who have taken pieces of nothing, the fragments, the leftovers, the crumbs, the bone that was left over, right? And they have made things of beauty. And so we thank them for weaving together tapestries, the little bits and pieces, the stuff nobody else wanted, the stuff that nobody else thought was any good. They have weaved together things of beauty, and we are so appreciative for them. Just by way of logistical announcements, I want you to know that we're moving into the foyer for our luncheon, and there will be just very briefly a time in which we are honoring some of our special guests, and so we ask you to adjourn immediately and go to the foyer. If you did not stop by registration and pick up a ticket, then you won't be able to eat. So I suggest you stop by registration and pick up a ticket so you can eat. I want to thank all of you for showing up this morning. I want to thank the faculty of Howard University School of Divinity. There are several faculty members who are just scattered throughout. If you all would just stand, Dr. Dr. Bellis is here. Thank you all so much. It matters when your faculty come out and support you. There are vendors here. These are Black-owned products. These are African-American that you stopped by. And our only final note is that our program at lunch is short because we want it to be a time of fellowship. Talk to each other, connect with each other across the generations, visit the vendors, get a little fresh air outside, and then we will reconvene in this space as we talk about the continuing legacy of this womanist tapestry. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon.